Hi there. Today what we're going to do is do some coding and we're going to look at how we can take those concepts that we've learnt now in algorithms of sequence, selection and repetition and use those in a C# program. So for that purpose we're going to create a BMI calculator. Okay, so a BMI calculator, our scenario that we're going to use is that our client, a doctor, would like an application which is going to calculate a person's BMI based upon their height and weight. Our initial design is going to be a text-based console app, and after each calculation is performed, then the application should prompt the user for another set of details, so another set of height and weight, until blank values are entered for the weight and the height. So BMI, first of all we have to look at the design stage of our problem development. So for design we have to work out what BMI is and do some research. So BMI is a value that's calculated from the mass of a person and the height of a person, and it's a way of calculating for health, whether a person is categorized as underweight, normal weight, overweight or obese. And you can see there in the middle the BMI is defined as the body mass, so your weight, divided by the square of the body height. And because it's the mass in kilograms divided by the height of squared, it's expressed in kilograms per meter squared. Okay, so kg/m squared. So you can always look at units to see if you can try to work out what a formula is going to be. You can see kg per meter squared means that we're dividing a weight is going to be divided by a distance, a height, squared. Okay, so now we've got that, we need to work out what the formula for BMI is. So the mathematical formula. So what I'd like you to do here first of all is pause me and write down and put into your copy of the slides what the BMI formula is going to be in mathematical terms. Okay, hopefully you've done that calculation now and you have a BMI formula written on this slide in your notes. So you've done some practical application. You can do that in 2s or 3s if you haven't been able to work it out. Now we need to actually have a look at our categories. So a little bit more research tells us that if somebody's BMI score is less than 18.5, then that means that they fall into the category underweight. If they're 18.5 to just less than 25, then that means they're in the normal weight category. If they're 25 to just less than 30, they're considered overweight, and if they get a score for their BMI of 30 or more, then that puts them into the obese category. Now, BMIs for kids or children, people who are less than 20, are calculated differently to those to adults. So these are the categories that are put in for adults. And that's from the World Health Organization. So that's the WHO categories for BMIs. Now what we need to do is pause me once again, and at this stage what I want you to do is design an algorithm explaining how your code is going to work. So this is still in the design stage. So you can use either pseudocode or a flowchart, work out the steps that you're going to need to follow, or your code is going to need to follow, in order to solve the BMI problem. So just to give you a starter, the first thing you're going to need to do is get the height. Then you'll need to get the weight, and then I want you to work out the following steps that you're going to need to perform in order to calculate the BMI. Put the algorithm here on this slide. Pause me at this stage, and then once you've worked out the algorithm you can come back and we'll continue. Alright, hopefully you've now got an algorithm on your slide which is showing the steps that you're going to need to follow in order to code. So this is still in our design stage. Remember, we're following the design, produce, evaluate cycle for developing a solution. Now we need to design some test data. So in order to test both our algorithm and our code, we're going to need to have a set of test data. So a set of data for the heights and the weights which are actually going to test whether or not our program is working. So in order to do that, I'm going to jump back a couple of slides. So you can see here first of all that we need to find values for each of these rows. So something that's going to produce a BMI less than 18.5, something between 18.5 and 25, something between 25 and 30, and something that's 30 or more. So we're going to need test data that tests each of these ranges, and you'll remember from our session on test data and when we were looking at test data, you not only check the ranges but you also check the boundaries. So what we also want is a set of test data which is going to give us a BMI of 18.5, because if the value is 18.5, then they should fall into this category here, normal weight. Often when you're coding, you'll get the symbols wrong, and you might accidentally make them fall into this category here when they have a BMI of 18.5. But this category is only less than 18.5. If they're equal to 18.5, then they should be in the normal weight category. So for our boundaries, we need to test 18.5, 25, and 30. And so we need to come up with some test data that's going to give us a BMI for each of those values. Okay, so if I jump forward on this slide, what I want you to do is come up with the test data and work out what BMI each set of test data is going to give us. So height and weight, remember those are the two variables, and why you've selected each of those heights and weights. Okay, so pause me here and in pairs or triples come up with a set of test data to test both your algorithm and your code. Okay, hopefully you've finished developing that test data now. I probably shouldn't have paused as long there. Now our next step is to create your application. So we're going to create a console app in Visual Studio. So for Visual Studio, remember, in order to create a console app, you'll need to start Visual Studio, and then you go to File and you choose New Project. And once you've got your new project, make sure that you're using a Windows desktop console app. So choose Windows console app, give it a name. This is going to be our BMI console app. And then you say OK. And that will create for you the console window and your coding window where you can develop the code. Remember that once you load this in, you find the main procedure. Press enter a couple of times so that you don't delete things, and this is where you're going to write your code for your console app. So you now take your algorithm and create a console app. Once you've done that, what I'd like you to do on the slide that we're looking at, this one here, is copy the static void main procedure. So everything from there down to the curly bracket as well as your code, and paste that onto the slide showing the process that you've followed to develop your console app. So pause me once again and see if you can develop your console app there. Okay, now we're going to move on to our evaluation. For an evaluation, we want to evaluate our application in terms of the function. So the first thing I want you to think about is how well your BMI calculator solves our initial doctor's problem, so how well it solves our initial client problem. Then it's usability. What features make it easy to use, or what features make it difficult to understand the information that's presented by the application. And then the final thing you need to evaluate is the appearance, how it looks. So if you can pause me here and fill out your evaluation for your console app, and then once you've completed that console app, come back and start me up again and we'll keep moving through. Alright, now we've come across a new problem. We've given the client our console application, and they've decided that not only do they love our console application and it's very useful, but they've improved, or they want to improve, to become a Windows-based application with a GUI. So our new problem is to take our console app and create a graphical user interface for it. So what you'll need to do when we get to Visual Studio, save your console app version, and in Visual Studio we're going to use the code and the sequences that we created in our console app, but we're now going to create a Windows-based GUI for it. So step one in your design is I want you to come up with a screen design for your GUI. So on this slide you can sketch what you think would be a good screen design, remembering the inputs that you need and the output that you're going to produce, and come up with a way of designing the screen as a plan for your new graphical user interface. Alright, pause me here and sketch on this slide the design for your GUI. Alright, now we're going to start a Visual Studio once again, and this time instead of creating a console application we're going to create a Windows Forms application. And I want to take your design, or I want you to take your design from your GUI, put all of those objects onto the form from your Windows form, and then develop the code that's actually going to calculate the BMI and put each of those categories, or tell you which category you fall into based upon the height and the weight and the calculated BMI. Alright, and our final step. We now need to perform another evaluation because we've got a new problem to solve, which is our graphical user interface. And this time, once again, we're going to evaluate in terms of the function, the usability, and the appearance. The function is how well the BMI calculator is able to solve your client problem. The usability is how easy it is to use and understand the information as it's presented in your GUI version of the application. And the appearance is the overall look. So what could you do to improve that, or what do you really like about the appearance and the way that it currently works? Alright, there will be some helper videos if you've struggled along with any of the different sections of this task. Hopefully you've been able to complete all the slides and follow the directions that are given to you.